Oh, that was the first game I really got to let it loose, and I was very mad that game, so I wanted to let it all out. He didn't even
Hey,
jump.
there you go. No reaction.
I thought that was secure. Secure the ball.
Change, man.
Change. I was ready for it. I ain't gonna lie.
Well, it's pretty clear that the no fun rule that the OU football creative team talked about on social media was indeed nothing more than an April Fool because, well, that was certainly a fun moment between Jaron Kanik and Eddie Pierre Louis. And Brandon, yesterday at practice, they kicked off the entire session with something that could be categorized as fun. Obviously,
Yeah.
still work, still competition between the guys, but we got to see one-on-ones to start practice yesterday, which was a first throughout the spring practice period for Oklahoma.
It definitely was. I was actually shocked. I was so confused when you and I walked up and they're like everybody started like huddling around and we were like, what is going on? And Jesse goes, one on ones, one on one. So we just all started sprinting just to get over there because we hadn't got to see something like that. And they did it all the way on the far end of the field. But yesterday was probably the most, and I was talking to a source yesterday, last night, and I told them, that was probably the most fun I've had at a practice session in a while, to where we got to feel what things look like. And I remember telling you, Jesse, George Storia, and I kind of looked it back and I said, we may not be idiots. The offensive line actually may be halfway decent this year because they were putting in work against some really good defensive linemen and doing a really good job. And yes, it's one-on-ones, but we watched it last year. Remember indoors, we got to see the one-on-ones a little bit, and the defensive line whooped the offensive line's butt in that session. So, I'm just comparing seasons with what we saw, because that's all we have, right? And it's March. But I don't know. The more you hear about the offensive line, the visuals that we got to see yesterday, there's reason to have some confidence. You don't want to be overconfident. You don't want to get, the cart before the horses or anything like that, but you got a chance. You got a chance right now if they do keep progressing.
R. Mason Thomas got the better of Luke Baklenko, which you expect, right? R. Mason Thomas is, you would hope, going to be one of the best defensive linemen in college football in 2025. He certainly was the Sooners' premier defensive lineman in 2024 as a junior. But other than that, we saw Eddie Pierre Louis hold his own against David Stone. We saw Jacob Sexton win a one-on-one rep. We saw Michael Fasusi win a one-on-one rep. And as we've talked about on the Under the Visor podcast, Brandon, down there in the trenches, yeah, obviously I think there's a little bit more depth on the defensive line, and there may be a little bit better top-end talent on the defensive line.
Yeah.
But the O-line has been able to hold up thus far in the spring practice period. They're going to bring in additional reinforcements. Stanford transfer Jake Michaela is going to visit later this week, which we'll discuss in greater detail on the Under the Visor podcast. But certainly encouraging to see the healthy back and forth up close and personal with our own two eyes in that type of intense competitive setting. I will say the rep of the day probably belonged to Carson Kent. You wouldn't have thought that Carson Kent would have got the upper hand on Michael Boganowski, but that's exactly what happened. Put a nice little move on him at the top of the route, got open, hauled in the pass from John Mateer during one-on-ones between tight ends and safeties. So nice little moment for Carson Kent. Isaiah Satania was another guy that had a nice one-on-one rep as well. And all in all, Brandon, just fun to kind of have that departure from the norm.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly for us, and I would imagine for those guys as well.
Yeah, it was, it wasn't just the same drills that we get to see quite a bit. It was an intense workout. I have to tell you, like, it felt like they did a lot more yesterday at practice. Like, even after the one-on-ones, we got to see more than we've gotten to see. And it felt like they weren't doing field goals or, that type of deal. It felt like there was a little bit more openness. And you you can see the confidence in the offense, by the way. Like you see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very it's evident. I'll wait to report some of this stuff on OU Insider VIP, Parker, but like some of the stuff I witnessed, particularly with Ben Arbuckle, was very, very, you can tell that he's young. I'll put it to you like that. Like, and you can tell that the players are buying into his youthfulness and his confidence because there's a swagger that I, I don't know that even Dylan Gabriel brought whenever he was there. Nor
Essentially, what
Jeff
you're
Levy.
saying is Arbuckle hasn't been jaded by old age yet and a wealth of experience,
Correct.
which is
It's
a double-edged sword, right? That could be a good thing. That could be a bad thing.
you want to
But
reminds me of?
certainly, what's that?
So you weren't around here yet during that time, but when Lincoln Riley first showed up, there was a lot of competitiveness. There was a lot of he was brash when he first showed up. He wasn't jaded by being a head coach. Like people forget that guy whenever they beat Ohio State quickly said during a post-game interview, we're just a bunch of pretenders. Like took shots at the media, like had that swagger about him still because he was just coming. That was game 2 of being head coach. He still had that OC mindset at the time and that young 35, 36-year-old swagger that he had at that time. So maybe even younger, 33, 34, I can't remember, but Arbuckle has a lot of that in him. And just things I was told yesterday after practice, things that we saw, it, there's a lot of similarities there, and they're West Texas guys too. So not to get everybody hyped up over some of the greatest offenses of all time, because I don't think that's the case or close to it. But I think you're going to see this is going to be a fun team. I think fans are going to like them.
We had a fun little media availability session last night. I got to see one new face, a face that's been around for a couple of years, but has never been granted availability with us in an interview setting. And that was Taylor Heim. Here you go,
Yeah.
everybody. Meet Taylor Heim.
I've kind of seen both sides of this place, like kind of like the scout team side and then the like getting some reps. So yeah, it really helped me develop like that kind of like pride for this place. Like, I love this place. It's taught me so much about life, just being a man growing up. So
Real unique specimen, right, Brandon? 6'6" at the linebacker position. You don't see many of those guys. And when Oklahoma took Taylor Heim at the very, very tail end of the 2023 recruiting cycle, they weren't really sure what he was going to be at the next level. They just figured, hey, you know what? This guy's a good enough athlete. We'll be able to do something with him. And it's taken time for him to settle in. And he's starting to pick up elements of a new position this offseason. He was specifically and only playing Cheetah last year, or repping at Cheetah, I should say, on the practice field. He started to rep at inside linebacker a little bit this offseason, this spring as well. And from everything that we've heard, he's a guy that's taken some strides and somebody that you may very well see in the mix at that linebacker position and potentially at Cheetah in 2025. To this point, he's only appeared in one game as a Sooner. It was the opener against Arkansas State in 2023 when Oklahoma won 73-0, and basically everybody got in the game that afternoon. But Taylor Heim has just kind of had to embrace the grind and fully buy into what was probably going to be a bit of a lengthier process because of how raw he was coming in. And he's done that for 2 years. And now here in 2025, as has been the case for several guys throughout the offseason, you feel like they're starting to turn the corner a little bit.
Yeah, he was super athletic coming out of high school, but was like a twig, right? Like OU wasn't sure if he was going to end up being a cheetah? Was he going to be able to put the weight on? Was he going to be able to have to be a hybrid wide receiver? Like there were so many things that they thought he might be able to be, but so they just took him. And were like, hey, this guy's doing 360 dunks in games and dominating in basketball, and his football film's pretty good. If he focuses solely on football, maybe he can become something in a few years down the line. Now you're starting to see it. And he's putting on the weight. He's close to 225 now. They're trying to get him up to like 235, 240 because that'll be good size for him with his frame. So I look, I don't know what he's going to be this year, how much he's going to play, but he's been making plays in spring, and that's a far cry to what he was when he first got to Oklahoma. I think he might be in the rotation at the end of the by the end of the season, Parker. I really do. Like there's a decent chance of that.
There's going to be a window for him. We also got to talk to David Stone last night, which is always fun. He's always one of those guys that you look forward to interviewing. And David Stone, I don't know that I would call it brash. I don't know that I would call it cocky, but there was a definite air of confidence in the way that he addressed the media last night as he gets ready for his sophomore season this fall and to take another leap in 2025. That's the expectation in his mind. That's the expectation across the board within the Switzer Center. And at least from David Stone's perspective, he's been doing the right things to this point in the offseason to prepare himself for that leap.
I feel like this year I made the jump as a player, being able to dominate that space, whether it's, in life or football. So, like my grades, I finished with I know I made the SEC honor roll thing or whatever that was. I got that, so I was proud of that. That's a big accomplishment for me, off the field. And then on the field, I've been killing it this spring. Winter workouts was a fun time for me. I'm up like 15, 20 pounds, moving better than ever. So those things, making those small improvements and, all over has been a big part of my game so far.
So there you go, Brandon. David Stone's pretty convinced that it's all starting to come together for him. He mentioned the weight gain. He mentioned the added muscle mass. And you see that right on the practice field. He's very noticeably bulkier than he was a season ago. But he also mentioned the detail that as he sees it, he's moving better than he ever has at 310, 315 pounds.
Yeah, everybody that you talk to talks glowingly about David Stone right now. Like just how well he's played, everything that he's been able to do on the field this offseason, this spring. He is the light bulbs come on, allegedly, and we saw a little bit of that yesterday. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder of that one-on-one between him and EPL. But he definitely moved EPL. You could see his strength. And that, to me, is the biggest difference. Is that's not something that David Stone was really good at was bull rushing. He was always really good with his hands. He was always really good with his feet. Moves, counter moves. He just never was strong enough to bull rush. And now you see him. And I think that's going to be a huge plus for him as a defensive tackle because he was more of a defensive end, kind of a hybrid D tackle in high school. But he's had a fantastic spring. He knows it. Everybody's talking about it. He's gone from being the fifth defensive tackle to maybe the second, third, fourth, right? And when you say fourth, that doesn't really mean that means your second rotation. That's
you're playing a lot of snaps.
Yes, playing a ton of snaps. So he's making some moves, starting to live up to that 5-star billing, Parker.
And folks are going to want to see that on the field in 2025. We're all going to want to see that on the field in 2025, but you certainly saw flashes of it in 2024. I think you saw, even in the very limited action that he got, what he could be with added mass, with added quickness, and added polish. And you would hope and expect that a full offseason to improve the things in his tool belt and improve his physical composition as an athlete is going to help get him there. So a lot to be excited about with David Stone and a lot to be excited about with that defensive tackle room, which is as deep and as talented as any defensive tackle group in the SEC. Well, folks, that's going to do it for this post-practice blitz. As I mentioned earlier, though, look forward to another version of the OU Insider Under the Visor podcast coming your way later in the week. Brandon and I will break down the impending visit from Stanford offensive line transfer Jake Michaela. We'll discuss more of what we're hearing from the practice field. I'm sure we'll dig into what's going on in the basketball portal as well. All of that you can look forward to in our next Under the Visor podcast. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already. That's completely free. If you don't mind spending a few bucks a month for the best OU intel that there is, OUinsider.com is where you're going to want to be. Tap in with us over there, and we will see you on the other side. Take it easy.